Have you ever noticed how your joy slowly fades without a clear reason, even when nothing in your life seems wrong? You wake up, move through the day, and smile when needed, yet something inside feels heavy and tired. Buddhism teaches that happiness does not disappear suddenly. It is quietly drained by what we continue to hold without awareness. Some things don't steal your joy by breaking you. They steal it by staying, lingering in your thoughts, relationships, and habits long after they have stopped bringing peace. If you've been feeling distant from yourself or quietly unhappy even when everything looks fine, this message is not here to force positivity. It is here to help you finally let go and allow joy to return naturally. 1. Attachment is the root of quiet suffering. Buddhism teaches that attachment is the deepest and most hidden cause of suffering, not because love is wrong, but because attachment quietly turns love into dependence. Many times, what we call love is actually fear in a gentle disguise. Fear of being alone, fear of change, fear of losing what feels familiar. We attach ourselves to people, memories, routines, and expectations long after they have stopped bringing peace into our lives. At first, this attachment feels comforting, but over time, it becomes heavy. You may notice that you are always waiting for someone to behave differently, hoping situations will improve, or replaying old memories in your mind, believing they still have power over your happiness. This is how attachment slowly drains joy without making noise. We often tell ourselves that we are being patient, understanding, or loyal, but deep inside, something feels tired. That tiredness is the soul asking for space. When attachment takes control, joy becomes fragile because it depends on things outside of you. Your mood begins to rise and fall based on how others treat you, what they say, or whether life meets your expectations. Buddhism teaches that anything your happiness depends on can also become a source of suffering. When you need someone to stay the same, to choose you, or to fulfill a certain role in your life, you are no longer free. You are emotionally negotiating your peace every day. Letting go does not mean you stop loving or caring. It means you stop gripping life so tightly that it cannot breathe. It means you allow people to be who they are, situations to unfold as they will, and yourself to remain whole even when things change. You can care deeply without losing yourself. You can love without attachment. The moment you loosen your grip on what you cannot control, something shifts inside you. The mind softens, the heart becomes lighter, and slowly, quietly, suffering begins to lose its power over you. 2. Not everything that feels familiar is good for you. The mind naturally clings to what feels familiar, even when that familiarity causes pain. Buddhism teaches that the mind seeks comfort before it seeks truth, which is why we often stay connected to people, habits, and situations that quietly drain us. Familiarity feels safe because it is known. Even when something hurts, the mind prefers what it recognizes over what is uncertain. This is why many people remain in relationships that no longer bring peace, repeat habits that harm their growth, or hold on to emotional patterns that keep them stuck. They are not choosing suffering consciously. They are choosing what feels familiar. Over time, familiarity can become a silent trap. You may feel uncomfortable when you imagine letting go, not because what you are holding is good for you, but because you do not know who you would be without it. The mind whispers, "At least this is known." But Buddhism reminds us that comfort is not the same as peace. Comfort can coexist with anxiety, tension, and emotional exhaustion. Peace cannot. Peace requires space, honesty, and growth. When something no longer allows you to grow, it slowly steals your joy, even if it feels normal. Letting go of familiarity requires awareness and courage. It means asking yourself a simple but powerful question: Does this bring calm into my life, or does it only bring habit? Does it help me become lighter, or does it keep me emotionally heavy? When you choose peace over familiarity, you are not rejecting the past. You are honoring your present. Buddhism teaches that life is movement, not stagnation. Growth begins the moment you stop holding on to what feels safe but keeps you small. And when you release what no longer supports your inner peace, joy finds space to return naturally. 3. You lose joy when you carry what is not yours. One of the quietest ways joy disappears from life is when we begin carrying emotional weight that does not belong to us. Buddhism teaches that much of our suffering is not caused by our own pain, but by the pain we absorb from others without realizing it. We take responsibility for people's moods, their expectations, their disappointments, and even their life choices. Slowly, this emotional burden settles inside us. We feel tired without knowing why, heavy without understanding the source. Joy fades, not because life is harsh, but because we are carrying more than the heart was meant to hold. Many people confuse emotional responsibility with kindness. They believe that being a good person means always being available, always understanding, always absorbing the feelings of others. But Buddhism teaches compassion without attachment. True compassion does not require self-sacrifice to the point of inner harm. When you constantly adjust yourself to keep others comfortable, you slowly abandon your own emotional needs. You may begin to silence your truth, suppress your feelings, and tolerate behavior that drains you. Over time, this creates inner conflict. The heart wants peace, but the mind is busy managing everyone else. Carrying what is not yours creates emotional imbalance. Your happiness becomes dependent on how others feel. If they are upset, you feel responsible. If they are disappointed, you feel guilty. If they are unhappy, you feel like you have failed. This is not love. This is emotional entanglement. Buddhism reminds us that each person walks their own path and carries their own karma. When you try to carry someone else's emotional journey, you interfere with both their growth and your peace. You cannot heal someone by carrying their pain for them. Letting go in this context does not mean becoming cold or uncaring. It means learning where you end and others begin. It means understanding that you can support without absorbing, listen without carrying, and care without losing yourself. You are allowed to step back from emotional chaos. You are allowed to protect your peace without explanation. When you release the weight that does not belong to you, something powerful happens. The body relaxes. The mind quiets. The heart feels lighter. Joy begins to return, not because life has changed, but because you have finally stopped carrying what was never yours to hold. Buddhism teaches that inner peace grows when boundaries are rooted in awareness, not anger. When you let go of unnecessary emotional burdens, you make space for clarity, presence, and genuine happiness. You do not lose connection by doing this. You gain balance. And in that balance, joy can finally breathe again. 4. Resistance to change is resistance to peace. One of the deepest reasons people lose their joy is not because life is painful, but because they resist the natural movement of change. Buddhism teaches that everything in existence is impermanent. Nothing stays the same. Not people, not emotions, not circumstances, not even the versions of ourselves we once were. Yet the mind often fights this truth. We cling to how things used to be, how they should have been, or how we wish they would remain. This resistance creates silent suffering. The more we hold on, the more tense the heart becomes. Joy cannot survive in a mind that is constantly arguing with reality. Resistance often shows up as denial, frustration, or fear. You may feel upset when relationships change, when plans fall apart, or when life does not unfold the way you imagined. Instead of flowing with what is happening, the mind tightens. It asks endless questions. Why did this happen? Why did they change? Why is life unfair? Buddhism teaches that suffering begins when we demand that reality obey our expectations. The moment you insist that life should be different than it is, peace disappears. You are no longer present. You are trapped in a mental battle you cannot win. Letting go of resistance does not mean giving up or becoming passive. It means learning to accept what is already true. Acceptance is not weakness. It is clarity. When you accept change, you stop wasting energy fighting what cannot be undone. You begin to respond instead of react. The heart softens because it no longer feels threatened by every shift in life. Buddhism teaches that peace is found not in controlling life, but in understanding its nature. When you allow change to move through you, rather than against you, suffering loses its power. Many people fear change because they believe it will take something away from them. But Buddhism reminds us that change also brings renewal. Every ending creates space. Every loss carries a lesson. Every transition holds an invitation to grow. When you release your grip on the past, you open yourself to the present. Joy returns not because everything becomes perfect, but because you are no longer resisting what is unfolding. The mind becomes quieter, the body relaxes, life feels lighter. True peace arises when you stop asking life to stay the same and start trusting its movement. Resistance hardens the heart, acceptance frees it. And when you finally stop fighting change, you realize that joy was never lost. It was simply waiting for you to let go. 5. Joy cannot exist in a mind that replays pain. One of the most powerful ways joy is stolen from our lives is through the habit of mentally replaying pain. Buddhism teaches that suffering continues not because pain happened once, but because the mind keeps returning to it again and again. A painful moment may last minutes, hours, or days, but the memory of it can live inside the mind for years. Each time the mind replays the event, the body reacts as if it is happening now. The heart tightens, the breath shortens, peace disappears. Joy fades quietly, not because life is hurting you in the present, but because the mind is refusing to leave the past. Many people believe that revisiting pain is necessary to understand it, protect themselves, or prevent it from happening again. But Buddhism teaches a different truth. There is a difference between learning from pain and living inside it. When the mind repeatedly returns to old wounds, regrets, betrayals, or failures, it is not healing, it is feeding suffering. The mind begins to identify with the pain, turning it into a story about who you are. You may start to believe that your past defines you, that your mistakes describe you, or that your wounds are permanent parts of your identity. This belief slowly drains joy because it keeps you trapped in a version of yourself that no longer exists. The past cannot be changed, yet the mind treats it as unfinished business. It asks endless questions. Why did this happen? Why didn't I act differently? Why did they hurt me? Buddhism teaches that these questions do not bring peace because they have no final answers. The mind becomes restless, searching for closure in a place where closure cannot be found. Meanwhile, the present moment passes quietly, unnoticed. Joy lives only in the present, but the mind is too busy replaying pain to receive it. Letting go of mental pain does not mean denying what happened or pretending it did not matter. Buddhism does not teach suppression, it teaches awareness. Awareness means seeing pain clearly without clinging to it. It means acknowledging the wound without reopening it every day. Just as a physical wound cannot heal if it is constantly touched, emotional pain cannot heal if it is constantly replayed. When you keep returning to the past, you prevent the heart from resting. You keep the nervous system in a state of tension. Joy cannot grow in a mind that never feels safe. The mind often replays pain because it believes it is protecting you. It thinks that by remembering hurt, it can prevent future suffering. But Buddhism teaches that wisdom comes from presence, not fear. True protection comes from clarity, not obsession. When you are present, you respond to life as it is, not as it was. You see situations clearly instead of through the lens of old wounds. You act with awareness instead of reaction. This is where real strength is born. Letting go of pain begins with understanding impermanence. Buddhism reminds us that everything changes, including emotions, thoughts, and identities. The pain you experienced belonged to a moment that has already passed. Holding on to it does not honor it. It prolongs it. When you allow yourself to release mental pain, you are not erasing your past. You are freeing your present. You are allowing space for new experiences, new emotions, and new joy to enter your life. As the mind learns to stop replaying pain, something subtle shifts. The body relaxes, the breath deepens, the heart feels lighter. You may notice moments of calm that were not there before. Small joys begin to appear again, not because life has suddenly improved, but because you are finally present enough to notice them. Buddhism teaches that joy is not something you must chase. It arises naturally when the mind is no longer burdened by suffering. True peace comes when you stop visiting places that hurt you mentally. You do not owe your pain constant attention. You are allowed to move forward without carrying every memory with you. When you release the habit of replaying pain, you reclaim your inner freedom. And in that freedom, joy does not struggle to survive. It flows effortlessly, quietly, and naturally from within. 6. Letting go is an act of self-respect. Many people believe that letting go means losing something important, but Buddhism teaches a deeper truth. Letting go is not about loss, it is about self-respect. It is the moment you decide that your inner peace is valuable, that your emotional well-being matters, and that you no longer need to suffer in silence to prove your love, loyalty, or goodness. When you hold on to situations, people, or habits that constantly disturb your peace, you are quietly telling yourself that your calm is less important than keeping everything else intact. Over time, this self-neglect slowly erodes joy. Self-respect begins with awareness. It begins when you notice how certain interactions leave you feeling drained, anxious, or heavy. Buddhism teaches mindfulness not just as meditation, but as awareness of how life feels inside you. When you ignore these signals, you betray your own inner wisdom. You may continue to show up, explain yourself, or tolerate emotional discomfort, believing that endurance is strength. But endurance without awareness becomes self-harm. Letting go is the moment you stop confusing tolerance with wisdom. Many people remain attached to pain because they fear being misunderstood, judged, or seen as selfish. Buddhism reminds us that seeking approval is one of the fastest ways to lose peace. When your choices are driven by how others might react, you become disconnected from your own truth. You may suppress your needs, silence your voice, or stay in situations that diminish you. Over time, resentment quietly builds. Joy fades because the heart no longer feels respected, even by itself. Letting go is an internal decision before it is an external action. It does not always require confrontation, explanation, or conflict. Often, it begins with silence. You stop chasing. You stop explaining. You stop overextending yourself. Buddhism teaches the power of non-attachment, not as emotional coldness, but as inner stability. When you let go, you are no longer pulled in many directions. Your energy returns to you. The mind becomes clearer. The heart feels steadier. Self-respect also means accepting that not everyone will understand your growth. Some people are comfortable with the version of you that needed approval, tolerated discomfort, or carried emotional weight for others. When you change, they may resist. Buddhism teaches that resistance from others is not a sign that you are wrong. It is often a sign that you are no longer playing the role they expected. Letting go in these moments requires courage. It requires trusting your inner peace more than external validation. As self-respect grows, boundaries form naturally. These boundaries are not walls built from anger, but spaces created from clarity. You no longer feel the need to explain why you need distance, rest, or silence. You simply honor it. Buddhism teaches that when the mind is clear, actions become simple. You choose peace without drama. You choose calm without guilt. This is not selfishness. It is balance. Over time, letting go strengthens your relationship with yourself. You begin to trust your feelings. You listen to your intuition. You stop forcing connections that drain you. Joy begins to return because it finally has a stable place to live. Self-respect creates inner safety, and where there is safety, happiness can grow. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth through suffering. You understand that your worth was never dependent on endurance. Buddhism teaches that liberation begins the moment you stop clinging to what hurts you. Letting go is an act of courage, wisdom, and deep self-love. When you release what disrespects your peace, you reclaim your dignity. And in that dignity, joy no longer feels fragile. It feels natural, grounded, and quietly powerful. 7. True happiness comes from inner freedom. Buddhism teaches that true happiness is not something you gain by adding more to your life, but something you uncover by removing what weighs it down. Many people spend their lives chasing happiness through people, achievements, possessions, and recognition, believing that joy exists somewhere outside of them. Yet even when these things are achieved, peace often feels temporary. Happiness rises briefly, then fades. This happens because anything that depends on external conditions is fragile. When circumstances change, happiness disappears with them. Buddhism reminds us that lasting joy comes only from inner freedom, not from control, attachment, or endless desire. Inner freedom begins when you understand that nothing outside of you can permanently complete you. When happiness depends on someone choosing you, staying with you, or behaving in a certain way, you are not free. When joy depends on success, validation, or comparison, you live in constant tension. The mind becomes restless, always wanting more, always fearing loss. Buddhism teaches that this restless craving is the root of dissatisfaction. You are not unhappy because you lack something. You are unhappy because the mind keeps reaching outward instead of resting inward. Letting go is the doorway to inner freedom. When you release attachment to outcomes, expectations, and identities, the mind becomes lighter. You stop demanding that life meet your conditions before allowing yourself to be at peace. You stop postponing happiness until everything is perfect. Buddhism teaches that peace is available now, but only to a mind that is willing to stop grasping. Grasping tightens the heart. Letting go softens it, and in that softness, joy begins to appear naturally. Inner freedom also means releasing the need to control how life unfolds. Many people believe that control creates safety, but Buddhism teaches that control creates fear. When you try to control people, situations, or the future, you live in constant anxiety, worrying about what might go wrong. The mind becomes tense because it is always preparing for loss. Letting go of control does not mean becoming careless or passive. It means trusting life enough to respond rather than dominate. Trust allows the mind to relax. And when the mind relaxes, happiness flows more easily. True happiness arises when you are no longer at war with reality. Buddhism teaches acceptance not as surrender to suffering, but as alignment with truth. When you accept life as it is, rather than how you wish it to be, you stop exhausting yourself emotionally. You no longer waste energy resisting what cannot be changed. This acceptance creates space. In that space, you experience moments of stillness, clarity, and gratitude that were previously hidden beneath resistance. Joy does not announce itself loudly. It appears quietly when the mind stops struggling. Inner freedom also means releasing the identity you have built around pain, success, or survival. Many people unconsciously define themselves by what they have endured or achieved. Buddhism teaches that clinging to identity creates suffering because identities are temporary. When you identify too strongly with your past, you limit your present. When you define yourself by labels, roles, or achievements, you become afraid of losing them. Inner freedom arises when you understand that you are not your thoughts, your emotions, or your experiences. You are the awareness observing them. This realization creates profound peace. As inner freedom grows, happiness becomes simpler. You no longer need intense excitement or constant stimulation to feel alive. Small moments become meaningful. Silence feels comforting instead of empty. Being alone feels peaceful instead of lonely. Buddhism teaches that contentment is a form of wealth. When you are content, you stop chasing happiness because you recognize it already exists within you. This does not mean life becomes perfect. It means you become resilient. Joy no longer collapses when challenges arise. True happiness also includes compassion, but not at the cost of self-betrayal. When you are internally free, you can love deeply without attachment. You can give without depletion. You can walk away without hatred. Buddhism teaches that freedom allows love to be pure because it is not rooted in fear. When you let go of emotional dependence, relationships become lighter. They are no longer sources of suffering. They become shared experiences rather than emotional anchors. Inner freedom transforms how you experience life. You stop seeking approval. You stop comparing your path to others. You stop measuring your worth by outcomes. The mind becomes quieter because it no longer needs constant reassurance. In this quietness, happiness becomes steady. It is not dramatic or overwhelming. It is calm, grounded, and enduring. Buddhism teaches that this kind of happiness is not disturbed by change because it does not rely on permanence. Letting go does not empty your life. It clears it. It removes what blocks joy, not what creates it. When you release attachment, fear, control, and resistance, you discover that happiness was never missing. It was simply buried beneath layers of grasping. Inner freedom allows joy to rise naturally, without effort, without struggle, without condition. In the end, Buddhism teaches that happiness is not something you must search for endlessly. It reveals itself the moment you stop holding on to what steals your peace. When you let go, you return to yourself. And in that return, you find the quiet, lasting joy you were always seeking. 8. Peace grows when you choose simplicity over noise. Buddhism teaches that much of our suffering does not come from life itself, but from the unnecessary noise we allow into our minds and hearts. Noise does not only mean sound. It means mental clutter, emotional overload, constant stimulation, endless opinions, and the pressure to keep up with everything and everyone. Modern life encourages accumulation, more information, more connections, more desires, more responsibilities. But joy quietly disappears when the mind becomes overcrowded. Peace cannot survive where everything demands attention at once. Many people believe that staying busy, connected, and informed will bring fulfillment. Instead, it often brings exhaustion. The mind jumps from thought to thought, worry to worry, comparison to comparison. Buddhism teaches that when the mind is constantly occupied, it forgets how to rest. You may feel restless even when nothing is wrong. You may feel dissatisfied without knowing why. This is the cost of living without simplicity. Joy fades not because life lacks meaning, but because the mind has no space to feel it. Simplicity begins with awareness. It begins when you notice how certain inputs affect your inner state. Endless scrolling, constant conversations, emotional drama, and unnecessary obligations all take small pieces of your peace. Individually, they seem harmless. Together, they become overwhelming. Buddhism teaches mindful living, not as restriction, but as liberation. When you choose simplicity, you are not depriving yourself. You are protecting yourself. You are choosing quality over quantity, depth over excess, presence over distraction. Letting go of noise often feels uncomfortable at first. Silence can feel empty to a mind that is used to constant stimulation. But Buddhism teaches that silence is not emptiness, it is clarity. In silence, you begin to hear yourself again. You notice your breath, your emotions, your true needs. Joy does not shout, it whispers, and you can only hear it when the noise settles. Simplicity also applies to relationships. Not every connection deserves constant access to your energy. Buddhism teaches right association, meaning being mindful of who and what you allow close to you. Some relationships bring calm and understanding. Others bring confusion, tension, and emotional exhaustion. Letting go of unnecessary emotional entanglements creates space for genuine connection. Peace grows when you stop explaining yourself to those who do not listen and stop proving yourself to those who do not see you. Choosing simplicity means reducing emotional clutter as well. Many people carry unresolved guilt, comparison, resentment, and self-judgment. These emotions constantly replay in the mind, stealing joy silently. Buddhism teaches forgiveness, not as forgetting, but as releasing. When you let go of emotional excess, the heart becomes lighter. You are no longer weighed down by thoughts that serve no purpose. Joy returns naturally when the heart is not burdened. Simplicity is also about desires. Buddhism teaches that craving leads to dissatisfaction. The more the mind wants, the less it feels content. When happiness is always tied to the next achievement, the next purchase, or the next milestone, joy is postponed indefinitely. Choosing simplicity means appreciating what is already present. It means finding contentment in enough peace, enough comfort, enough meaning. This mindset shifts happiness from future conditions to present awareness. Living simply does not mean withdrawing from life. It means engaging with life consciously. It means choosing what adds value and releasing what drains energy. Over time, simplicity creates inner spaciousness. The mind slows down, the body relaxes, you become more present. Small moments become meaningful. A quiet morning, a deep breath, a simple meal, a peaceful walk all become sources of joy. Buddhism teaches that enlightenment is not found by adding more complexity to life, but by seeing clearly. Simplicity clears the lens through which you experience the world. When the lens is clear, joy is no longer hidden. It is woven into ordinary moments. Peace becomes a natural state rather than a rare experience. Choosing simplicity is an act of wisdom in a world addicted to excess. It is a gentle rebellion against noise. When you simplify your life, you simplify your mind. And when the mind is simple, joy does not struggle to exist. It flows quietly, steadily, and deeply from within. 9. Freedom begins when you stop searching for completion outside yourself. One of the most subtle ways joy is stolen from our lives is through the belief that something outside of us will finally make us whole. Buddhism teaches that this belief is one of the deepest illusions of the mind. From a young age, we are taught directly or indirectly that happiness will arrive when we find the right person, reach a certain goal, gain approval, or fix what feels missing. This constant searching creates a quiet restlessness inside the heart. Even during moments of success or connection, something still feels incomplete. Joy appears briefly, then fades again. This happens because we are looking for fulfillment in places where it cannot permanently live. The mind becomes conditioned to believe that happiness is always just one step away. One more achievement, one more relationship, one more change. Buddhism teaches that this endless reaching is the source of dissatisfaction. When happiness is tied to external completion, peace is delayed. The present moment is never enough. You may achieve what you once desired, only to feel empty shortly afterward. The mind then moves the goalpost, convincing you that fulfillment lies somewhere else. This cycle keeps joy unstable because it is always dependent on conditions. Freedom begins when you realize that nothing outside of you is meant to complete you. This realization can feel uncomfortable at first because it challenges deeply held beliefs. Many people fear this truth because they associate it with loneliness or detachment. But Buddhism teaches that inner completeness is not isolation. It is wholeness. When you stop looking outward for validation and meaning, you begin to reconnect with your inner stability. You no longer need constant reassurance to feel okay. The mind becomes quieter because it stops negotiating its worth with the world. Searching for completion outside yourself also affects relationships. When you expect another person to fill emotional gaps, provide constant happiness, or give your life meaning, the relationship becomes heavy. Expectations grow, disappointment follows. Buddhism teaches that love rooted in need leads to suffering. True connection arises when two whole individuals meet, not when two incomplete parts try to fix each other. Letting go of emotional dependence allows relationships to breathe. Love becomes lighter, freer, and more genuine because it is no longer driven by fear of emptiness. The same applies to success and identity. Many people define themselves by their roles, achievements, or struggles. Buddhism reminds us that identities are temporary. When your sense of self depends on external labels, you become afraid of losing them. Joy becomes fragile because it is tied to performance. Freedom arises when you understand that you are not your accomplishments, failures, or social roles. You are the awareness experiencing them. This understanding creates inner peace that remains steady even when circumstances change. Letting go of the search for external completion does not mean rejecting growth, ambition, or connection. It means changing the source of fulfillment. Instead of waiting for life to complete you, you allow yourself to be complete as you are. Buddhism teaches contentment not as complacency, but as acceptance. When you accept yourself fully, you stop chasing happiness and begin experiencing it. Joy becomes something you notice rather than something you pursue. This inner completeness changes how you experience everyday life. You stop rushing toward the future. You stop replaying the past. The present moment feels sufficient. Simple experiences become meaningful because they are no longer overshadowed by longing. A quiet moment feels peaceful instead of empty. Solitude feels nourishing instead of lonely. Buddhism teaches that when the mind stops searching, it starts seeing, and what it sees is often more beautiful than what it was chasing. Freedom also means releasing comparison. When you believe others have what you lack, joy becomes impossible. Comparison keeps the mind restless and dissatisfied. Buddhism teaches that each path is unique. When you stop measuring your life against others, you reclaim your inner balance. You begin to appreciate your journey without judgment. Joy grows naturally when comparison fades because gratitude takes its place. As you stop searching for completion outside yourself, a subtle confidence emerges. You no longer feel desperate for approval or validation. You trust your inner ground. This does not make you indifferent. It makes you grounded. You engage with the world from stability rather than need. Buddhism teaches that true freedom is not the absence of desire, but the absence of dependence. When you no longer depend on external conditions to feel whole, joy becomes resilient. In the end, Buddhism teaches that you were never incomplete. The belief that you were missing something was learned, not true. When you release that belief, something profound happens. The heart relaxes. The mind settles. Life feels lighter. Joy no longer comes and goes unpredictably. It becomes a quiet presence that accompanies you through change, challenge, and growth. Freedom begins the moment you stop searching for yourself in the world and start resting in who you already are. And in that resting, true joy finally has space to stay. 10. Letting go reveals the natural joy that was always there. Buddhism teaches that joy is not something you create by effort, force, or achievement. It is something that already exists beneath the surface of the mind. What hides it is not life itself, but the layers of clinging, fear, resistance, and self-judgment we accumulate over time. Many people believe they must become someone else, fix everything, or reach a certain stage in life before they are allowed to feel happy. Buddhism gently dismantles this belief by teaching that joy is your natural state when the mind is no longer burdened. Letting go does not add happiness to your life. It removes what blocks it. From childhood, the mind learns to hold tightly. It holds on to praise and criticism, success and failure, identity and comparison. Each experience leaves a mark. Over time, these marks become stories the mind tells about who you are and how life works. Buddhism teaches that these stories are not reality. They are mental constructions. When you identify with them completely, joy becomes conditional. You feel happy only when life agrees with your story, and unhappy when it does not. Letting go begins when you realize that these stories are not you. They are thoughts passing through awareness. Many people are afraid to let go because they believe it will leave them empty. Buddhism teaches the opposite. What feels like emptiness at first is actually space. Space is where peace lives. When you stop clinging to opinions, expectations, and emotional habits, the mind becomes quieter. In that quietness, you begin to sense a gentle contentment that does not depend on circumstances. This contentment is not excitement or pleasure. It is steadiness. It is the feeling of being okay without needing anything to change. This is the foundation of true joy. Letting go also reveals how much suffering was unnecessary. When you look back with awareness, you may notice that many of your worries never came true, many of your fears were imagined, and many of your struggles were prolonged by resistance. Buddhism teaches that suffering is often optional, created by the mind's refusal to accept impermanence. When you let go of the need for certainty, the future becomes less frightening. When you release attachment to outcomes, disappointment loses its grip. Joy grows because the mind is no longer bracing itself against imagined threats. Another layer that dissolves through letting go is self-judgment. Many people carry a harsh inner voice that constantly evaluates their worth. Buddhism teaches loving awareness, not self-attack. When you let go of the belief that you must earn peace, the heart softens. You begin to treat yourself with patience instead of pressure. Joy becomes possible when the inner environment is kind. A mind that is constantly criticizing itself cannot rest. Letting go of self-judgment creates inner safety, and where there is safety, happiness naturally arises. Letting go also changes how you relate to pleasure and pain. Buddhism teaches the middle way, avoiding extremes of indulgence and denial. When you cling to pleasure, you fear its loss. When you resist pain, you amplify it. Letting go means allowing experiences to arise and pass without attachment. Pleasure is enjoyed without fear. Pain is experienced without identity. This balanced relationship with life prevents joy from becoming fragile. Happiness no longer collapses when discomfort appears because it was never dependent on constant pleasure. As letting go deepens, you begin to experience joy and simplicity. Ordinary moments become meaningful because the mind is present. A quiet breath, a moment of stillness, a simple act of kindness, all carry a subtle sense of fulfillment. Buddhism teaches that mindfulness transforms experience. When you are fully present, life feels rich even without excitement. Joy becomes woven into daily living rather than reserved for special occasions. Letting go also brings humility. You stop trying to control how you are perceived. You stop defending an image of yourself. Buddhism teaches that ego is a source of suffering because it needs constant validation. When you let go of egoic attachment, interactions become lighter. You listen more, you react less. Relationships feel less draining because you are not protecting a fragile self-image. Joy grows quietly when the mind no longer needs to prove itself. Over time, letting go reveals a deeper truth. You realize that happiness was never missing. It was simply covered by effort. The more you tried to grasp it, the further it seemed. When you stop chasing joy and start releasing resistance, joy reveals itself naturally. This joy is not dramatic. It does not rise and fall intensely. It is calm, steady, and resilient. It remains present even during difficulty because it is rooted in awareness, not conditions. Buddhism teaches that awakening is not a dramatic transformation into someone new. It is a gentle remembering of who you were before fear, attachment, and conditioning took over. Letting go is the process of returning to that simplicity. Each time you release a grip, forgive yourself, or accept what is, you move closer to inner freedom. Joy does not need to be invited. It appears when the obstacles are removed. In the end, letting go is an act of trust. Trust in impermanence. Trust in your inner resilience. Trust that life does not need to be controlled to be meaningful. When you trust enough to release what weighs you down, you discover that joy has been quietly waiting within you all along. It does not demand effort. It asks only for space. 11. When you let go, you finally return to yourself. Buddhism teaches that much of our suffering comes not from what we experience, but from how far we drift away from ourselves while trying to survive, please, and control. Over time, many people slowly lose connection with their inner voice. They adapt, adjust, and reshape themselves to fit expectations, relationships, and circumstances. At first, this feels necessary. Later, it feels exhausting. Joy fades not because life has taken something away, but because you have been living at a distance from your own truth. Letting go is the journey back. From an early age, the mind learns who it should be. It learns what is acceptable, what earns approval, and what must be hidden. These lessons become internal rules. Slowly, you stop listening to what you feel and start listening to what you think you should feel. Buddhism teaches that this disconnection is a source of suffering. When you are not aligned with yourself, even success feels empty, even love feels heavy. Letting go begins when you notice this misalignment and choose honesty over habit. Many people fear returning to themselves because they do not know who they are beneath roles, responsibilities, and identities. The idea of letting go feels like losing structure. Buddhism teaches that the self you are afraid of losing was never solid to begin with. It was a collection of beliefs, reactions, and memories. Beneath that is awareness, still, observing, whole. When you let go of who you were taught to be, you do not disappear. You become clearer. Returning to yourself means allowing your feelings without judgment. It means listening to fatigue instead of ignoring it. It means honoring discomfort instead of explaining it away. Buddhism teaches mindfulness as deep listening. When you listen to yourself, you begin to understand what drains you and what nourishes you. Joy returns slowly, not as excitement, but as relief. The relief of no longer pretending, the relief of no longer forcing yourself to be okay when you are not. Letting go also means releasing internal pressure. Many people live with a constant sense of urgency, believing they must always improve, achieve, or prove something. Buddhism teaches that worth is not earned through effort. When you let go of the need to constantly become something, you allow yourself to simply be. This does not stop growth. It makes growth natural. Growth that comes from peace rather than fear is sustainable. Joy thrives in an environment that is gentle, not demanding. As you return to yourself, you may notice grief. Grief for the years spent disconnected. Grief for the times you ignored your needs. Buddhism teaches compassion for this grief. It is not a mistake. It is part of awakening. When you feel this grief, it means awareness has arrived. And where awareness arrives, healing follows. Joy deepens because it is now rooted in truth, not avoidance. Returning to yourself also changes how you relate to others. You stop over-explaining, you stop shrinking, you stop chasing validation. Buddhism teaches that clarity simplifies relationships. When you know yourself, you no longer need to be everything to everyone. You become selective, not out of fear, but out of respect. Joy grows because your energy is no longer scattered, it is centered. Silence becomes important on this path, not silence as avoidance, but silence as presence. Buddhism teaches that silence allows wisdom to surface. When you sit with yourself without distraction, you begin to recognize a quiet steadiness that was always there. This steadiness does not disappear when emotions arise. It holds them. Joy grows here, not as a reaction to life, but as a background sense of okayness. Letting go and returning to yourself also means accepting your impermanence. You stop clinging to fixed identities. You allow yourself to change without guilt. Buddhism teaches that freedom comes when you stop trying to be consistent with an old version of yourself. You are allowed to evolve. Joy grows when you give yourself permission to outgrow what no longer fits. As this return deepens, you realize something profound. You were never broken. You were distracted. You were conditioned. You were coping. Letting go removes the layers that convinced you otherwise. What remains is not perfection. It is presence, and presence is enough. In this presence, joy no longer feels rare. It feels natural. It does not depend on approval, certainty, or control. It flows quietly through simple moments. A breath, a pause, a moment of honesty. Buddhism teaches that enlightenment is not an escape from life, but a return to it without resistance. When you let go, you do not lose yourself. You find yourself. And in that finding, joy stops hiding. It rests gently where it always belonged, within you. 12. Letting go teaches you how to trust life again. One of the deepest wounds many people carry is not just pain, loss, or disappointment, but the quiet loss of trust in life itself. Buddhism teaches that when suffering repeats, the mind slowly learns to expect harm. You may not notice it at first, but over time you become cautious, guarded, and tense, even during peaceful moments. Joy feels unsafe, calm feels temporary. You wait for something to go wrong. This is how suffering continues quietly, not because life is cruel, but because trust has been broken. Letting go is how trust begins to return. When life hurts you repeatedly, the mind creates armor. It holds tightly to control, planning, and emotional protection. You may believe this armor keeps you safe, but Buddhism teaches that clinging to control creates more fear, not less. The more you try to manage every outcome, the more anxious you become. You stop flowing with life and start bracing against it. Joy fades because the heart is always preparing for disappointment. Letting go begins when you see that constant defense is exhausting you. Trusting life does not mean believing nothing painful will happen again. Buddhism does not promise a pain-free life. It teaches wisdom in the face of impermanence. Trust means understanding that you can meet whatever arises with awareness and strength. When you let go of the need to predict and control everything, the mind begins to relax. You stop fighting the future before it arrives. This relaxation creates space for joy to appear, even in uncertainty. Many people struggle to let go because they associate trust with vulnerability. Buddhism teaches that vulnerability is not weakness, it is openness. When you are open, you experience life fully instead of defensively. You feel joy without fear of losing it. You feel sadness without believing it will last forever. Letting go allows emotions to move through you naturally. Nothing is clung to, nothing is resisted. This fluidity is the foundation of peace. Letting go also teaches patience. When you stop forcing outcomes, you allow life to unfold at its own pace. Buddhism teaches that impatience is rooted in fear, the fear that if things do not happen quickly, they may never happen at all. When you trust life, you stop rushing, you stop comparing timelines. You stop judging yourself for where you are. Joy grows quietly when you accept that growth cannot be rushed without harm. As trust returns, you begin to notice subtle support that was always present. Small moments of ease, unexpected help, quiet opportunities. Buddhism teaches that when the mind is not consumed by fear, it becomes more aware. You start seeing life not as an enemy to survive, but as a process to participate in. This shift changes everything. Joy becomes possible again because you no longer see every moment as a threat. Trusting life also means trusting yourself. When you let go of rigid control, you discover your own resilience. You realize that you have survived difficult moments before, even when you thought you would not. Buddhism teaches that confidence comes from experience, not prediction. Each time you face uncertainty and remain present, trust deepens. Joy grows because you no longer feel helpless in the face of change. Letting go teaches you to trust impermanence instead of fearing it. Buddhism reminds us that impermanence is not only the cause of loss, but also the cause of renewal. Pain ends because it is impermanent. Difficulty passes because it is impermanent. When you accept this truth deeply, fear softens. You stop clinging to moments out of fear of losing them. You enjoy them while they are here. Joy becomes richer because it is not grasped. Trusting life does not make you passive, it makes you present. You still take action, but without desperation. You still care, but without attachment. Buddhism teaches right effort, effort guided by wisdom rather than fear. When your actions are rooted in trust, they feel lighter. You are no longer trying to control life. You are cooperating with it. As letting go deepens, you begin to feel supported by life rather than opposed to it. This does not mean everything becomes easy. It means everything becomes workable. Challenges no longer feel like personal attacks. They feel like part of the path. Joy grows here, not as excitement, but as inner steadiness, a calm confidence that you can meet whatever arises. In this state, joy is no longer something you protect fiercely. You allow it to come and go naturally. You do not panic when it fades, and you do not cling when it appears. Buddhism teaches that this non-attachment is freedom. When you trust life, You trust the rhythm of experience. You trust that nothing needs to be forced. In the end, letting go teaches you that life was never asking you to control it. It was asking you to participate with awareness. Trust returns when you stop gripping the wheel and allow yourself to move with the flow. And in that movement, joy no longer feels fragile or rare. It feels like a quiet companion, walking with you through change, uncertainty, and growth. 13. Letting go teaches you how to live fully in the present moment. Buddhism teaches that life is only ever happening now, yet most suffering comes from not being here. The mind is often pulled into the past through regret, memory, and longing, or pushed into the future through worry, fear, and anticipation. When the mind lives anywhere except the present moment, joy quietly disappears. You may be alive, but you are not fully living. Letting go is the practice of returning to now, again and again, until presence becomes your home. Many people believe the present moment is something they already experience, but Buddhism teaches that presence is rare. The body may be here, but the mind is elsewhere. You may be eating while thinking about tomorrow, listening while planning what to say next, resting while replaying old pain. This constant movement of the mind fragments experience. Joy cannot take root because attention is divided. Letting go begins when you notice how often you leave the present without realizing it. The past pulls at the mind with unfinished stories. Regrets whisper about what should have been done differently. Memories replay moments of loss, embarrassment, or pain. Buddhism teaches that the past exists only as thought. Yet when the mind clings to it, the body responds as if the pain is happening again. Letting go does not mean erasing memory. It means releasing the habit of living there. When you stop feeding the past with attention, its grip weakens. The present moment begins to feel safer, calmer, and more alive. The future pulls at the mind with uncertainty. Worry imagines outcomes that have not yet arrived. Fear rehearses disasters that may never happen. Buddhism teaches that anxiety is the mind trying to control what cannot be controlled. When you let go of the future mentally, you do not become careless, you become present. You focus on what can be done now instead of what might go wrong later. This shift frees enormous energy. Joy grows when the mind stops racing ahead and returns to what is actually happening. Living in the present does not mean ignoring responsibility. It means meeting responsibility with awareness instead of tension. Buddhism teaches right attention. When attention is rooted in now, actions become clearer. You respond rather than react. You listen instead of preparing defenses. You experience life directly instead of through mental filters. Letting go of constant mental time travel allows experience to feel whole again. Presence also softens emotional pain. When emotions arise, the mind often labels them as problems to fix or threats to escape. Buddhism teaches mindful awareness of emotion. When you stay present with what you feel, without judgment or resistance, emotions move naturally. They do not get stuck. Joy returns not because emotions disappear, but because you are no longer fighting them. Presence allows space for everything to arise and pass. Letting go into the present also reveals how much beauty was being missed. Simple moments begin to feel rich. A breath feels grounding. A quiet room feels peaceful. A small act of kindness feels meaningful. Buddhism teaches that happiness is often subtle. It does not shout. It appears when the mind is still enough to notice. When you stop chasing stimulation, joy reveals itself in ordinary moments. Many people fear the present moment because they associate it with discomfort. They distract themselves to avoid feeling emptiness, sadness, or uncertainty. Buddhism teaches that the present moment is not the enemy. Avoidance is. When you stop running from now, you discover that most moments are actually neutral or gentle. Pain exists, but it is often amplified by resistance. Letting go of avoidance makes the present livable, even peaceful. Presence also deepens connection. When you are fully here, you see people more clearly. You listen without waiting. You speak without performing. Relationships feel more authentic because you are not projecting past wounds or future fears onto them. Buddhism teaches that presence is a form of love. When you give someone your full attention, you offer something rare and valuable. Joy grows in these moments of genuine connection. Living in the present also changes how you experience yourself. You stop defining yourself by past mistakes or future goals. You experience yourself as awareness, alive and responsive. Buddhism teaches that this awareness is your true nature. When you rest in it, you feel grounded and steady. Joy arises not from excitement, but from being at ease with existence. Letting go into the present moment is a practice, not a single decision. The mind will wander again and again. Buddhism teaches patience. Each time you notice distraction and gently return to now, you strengthen presence. Over time, presence becomes more natural. Joy becomes more accessible because it is no longer postponed or remembered. It is experienced. In the present moment, life feels manageable. You are no longer carrying the weight of the past or the anxiety of the future. You deal with one moment at a time. Buddhism teaches that this is enough. You do not need to solve your entire life today. You only need to be here. Joy grows when you stop demanding more from this moment than it can give. As letting go deepens, you realize something simple and profound. Peace was never missing. You were just not here to experience it. The present moment does not promise perfection, but it offers reality without distortion. In that reality, there is space to breathe, space to feel, and space to live. Letting go brings you back to now, and now, quietly, patiently, joy is waiting. Buddhism teaches that joy is not something distant, rare, or reserved for a later time in life. It is something natural that has always lived within you. What takes it away is not failure, loss, or hardship alone, but the way the mind clings, resists, and carries what no longer belongs. Throughout this journey, you have seen that joy fades when you hold on too tightly, when you replay pain, when you search outside yourself for completion, when you resist change, and when you lose trust in life. Letting go is not about giving up on life. It is about finally allowing yourself to live it fully. Releasing what steals your joy does not mean cutting yourself off from the world or becoming indifferent. It means learning the wisdom of non-attachment. You learn how to care without clinging, love without fear, and engage with life without losing yourself. When you let go of what drains you, you do not become empty. You become lighter. The heart softens, the mind slows, the body relaxes. Peace returns quietly, without effort. Many people wait for life to become perfect before allowing themselves to be at peace. Buddhism teaches the opposite. Peace comes first. From peace, clarity grows. From clarity, wise action follows. When you stop demanding certainty, control, and validation, joy becomes stable. It no longer rises and falls dramatically. It becomes a steady presence that walks with you through both ease and difficulty. Letting go is not a single moment. It is a daily practice. Each time you release an expectation, forgive a memory, loosen control, or return to the present moment, you protect your inner peace. Each small release creates space, and in that space, joy breathes. You may not notice it immediately, but over time, life feels lighter. You respond instead of react. You trust instead of fear. You rest instead of rush. Buddhism reminds us that impermanence is not a threat. It is the reason healing is possible. Pain changes. Circumstances change. You change. When you accept this truth deeply, You stop clinging to moments and stop fearing loss. You enjoy what is here while it is here. You let go when it is time. This is freedom. This is wisdom. This is peace. You do not need to become someone else to be happy. You do not need to fix everything before you deserve calm. You only need to stop holding what is hurting you. Release what steals your joy gently and without anger. Trust that what belongs in your life will remain without force. What leaves was never meant to carry your happiness. In the end, joy is not something you chase. It is something you return to. And every time you let go, you take one quiet step closer to yourself.